It is hard to contain my excitement this morning. I am drinking decaf coffee, so this is all natural. Today at It All Media and for the Fuck It All podcast, this is such a big moment. One, today's conversation with Vella Bioscience, a content partnership talking about women, sex, pleasure. It is a rewrite on the narratives that have traditionally been taboo, dismissed, and women have been historically excluded from. If you are a listener today, 12,000 strong of you, which is freaking us out, please go check out vellabio.com. All of this will be in the show notes, but using the code ITALLMedia, you get 30% off your first jar. Seriously, cannot say enough good things about this product, and we'll get into all of the ways that we love it and what this company stands for and what they're building. Second, we have mentioned it. I know we've been teasing it, but It All Media has been accepted by Maven, the #1 platform for course creators and thought leaders. Halfway through our very rigorous application, they emailed us and said, "We're fast tracking you. You have been approved." This, we hope to you, is validation of how freaking good this course is. We have been working with women, obviously telling these stories on the podcast and having hundreds of conversations now about what does it mean to have it all? How do you define, create, and own your it all? What is a fuck it all moment? How do you foster a fuck it all mindset? What we have done is culminated all of our research, all of our tools, all of our learnings into a define, create, own intensive. If you want to learn more about this and have ever thought, oh my God, I want to sit down with Casey and Katie to take all of these lessons from the Fuck It All podcast and apply it to my own life, this course is for you. itallmedia.co/Maven, or head over to Maven and search for It All Media or the Define, Create, Own Intensive. Again, all of this will be in the show notes, but we wanted to share this with you directly here before we get into today's episode. If you sign up, little early bird special, by August 12th, 2022, the course starts August 25th, you can use I am early promo code to get $200 off. So it is no longer $749, but $549. So without further ado, go look up Maven, go get you some Vella, and hit play for today's episode because we are about to take you on, honestly, a sexual empowerment journey. Let's freaking go.
Hello, and welcome to the Fuck It All podcast for modern women redefining it all. I am so excited because today we are talking about sex, baby. We are talking with Carolyn Wheeler. Carolyn is the COO and co-founder of Vella Bioscience, a femtech company driven to put science in service of every woman's sexual empowerment. In 2021, Vella Bioscience launched with its flagship category first product, Vella Women's Pleasure Serum, which is designed to give women power over their pleasure. I'm going to just give a little plug here. Katie and I, we can't endorse things we don't try. So we went ahead after meeting their CMO, Bulbul, who connected us with Carolyn. We purchased a couple of jars for scientific reasons only, had to
Of
try it
course.
out.
Yeah, obviously.
10 out of 10 recommend, ladies. 10 out of 10 recommend. So we're going to get into not only your individual story, Carolyn, but we're also going to be talking about the movement, this pleasure empowerment movement that Vella is starting around women taking ownership and autonomy over our pleasure as it relates to sex and wellness. And this to me is so, so powerful. Our mission and vision at It All Media is to see women as equal and valued architects of the systems that run our lives at work, at home, and in our communities. And buried within that is this idea of wellness, of pleasure, and it's beyond the orgasm. The orgasm is important. Love that for all of us, but it is what this represents. And you and I were talking in our first conversation. This represents a systemic lack of intention and importance historically in science, in medicine, in culture. And that is what I'm just so freaking excited to talk to you about today.
I wish I could go back and get a degree or something in the history of how women have been represented in health science and in medical schools. But there's a lot of literature out there that will tell you that, women weren't allowed into clinical trials until 1993. So in the ramifications of that, you see that there's prescription drugs that were developed during that time that worked differently in men than they did in women, and they have worse side effects in women than in men. So they didn't even think to study that before they started letting women buy these without having ever tested the drug in a woman's body. So yeah.
This feels like this has been a really big awakening. We've recently launched a partnership with Semaine Health. They're a women's multivitamin and supplement company. And in our conversations with their co-founders, Kath and Laura, we started talking about women in the medical system. And, you and I are both white women, but the numbers change drastically when you start talking about women of color, socioeconomic, like it changes drastically. But so often in our healthcare system, at least for me growing up and in my life, what the doctor says I've trusted, right? They went to school, they've done these things. But then as I've started to become more educated on the systemic effects of the patriarchy, of how women have been represented in these systems, it's just like you said, dawned on me, like, we have to take autonomy and begin to question and learn and be curious, because it's not out of maliciousness that these individuals, these professionals, that these doctors are not able to fully represent us, but it is out of a systemic structure. Like, the system is performing how it is designed. So the fact that we haven't been represented in medical trials, we have to now take a different approach and an awareness. And so that is what I love, is like, to me, owning of your pleasure is the start to be like, I'm going to take autonomy and actually have a point of view and participate. I can no longer not participate in these systems that are running our lives.
Absolutely. It's really important to understand what's missing, and it doesn't dawn on you until, well, it didn't dawn on me till we started this. Till I started working for Vella. There was, for instance, I think it was earlier this year, there went viral a medical illustration of a Black woman with a fetus in utero. And that went viral because women of color, people of color, have never been historically represented in medical illustration, which, going back to like the third or fifth century BC, has been the most consistent tool to teach young doctors what constitutes the body. And so, that said, I mean, that was on our radar. But while we were working, when we started developing, we started to bring Bella to market, we were thinking, okay, this is going to require a huge amount of education, like
Mhm.
up and down. What is female sexual arousal? How is that different than orgasm? How is that different than desire? And then with female sexual arousal, like, there's a physiological change in your body that we don't learn about, as I never learned about. I never certainly never learned about it in sex education. So that said, like, when we first started, when we first realized, okay, this is going to require an enormous amount of education, we started to look for diagrams and things of that nature, or a medical illustration that was like an authoritative image developed by someone who's, there's a whole board certification in order to be a medical illustrator. So we couldn't find there we couldn't find one. We couldn't find a medical illustration of what an aroused vagina looks like.
So let's just pause. You started this, the company's launched in 2021. And in the 2020s, there was not a documented, at least that you were able to find.
And we corroborated this with a woman who is a doctor who, her name is Dr. Nicole Prause. She runs a orgasm research lab in LA, which is
I
like
mean, honestly, best job ever.
best job ever. And she speaks a lot to this. So in her presentations that she does for big audiences, she has never been able to find one either. What she does is take a screenshot from pornography just to show what a lubricated vagina looks like. But
Yeah.
that's not the whole thing. There's a lot more that signals a sexual arousal, like engorgement, like your vulva elongates. Like, there's all these things that like are actually happening in your body.
Physiologically change
Yeah,
based on
that
your body, like take away. And I just love, like, you and I talked about this in our initial conversation. Like, historically, even saying this, vulva, labia, clitoris, those feel like, oh my God, these are sex words. And we're saying sex but
yeah,
we don't say that when we talk about penis and Viagra. We don't get shy. Like, these are things
no.
that need to be
Or
talked about in matter of fact ways.
And we're all very familiar with like what male sexual arousal is, like,
Yes.
and what that looks like. And the medical community is very familiar. And that's in part, that comes from a systemic belief that women, I think, that women's sexual pleasure doesn't matter as much because if it did, doctors and researchers would have made this diagram, would have done this research and looked more into the complexities of female sexual arousal a long time ago, and would have been developed something like Vella a long time ago. Instead, because they have ample data, because that's the data that they've been looking for.
Right, exactly. Like, we have
uh,
to caveat
yeah.
that.
So there's tons and tons of treatments for men because of how much research has been done on male sexual pleasure. There hasn't been the same on women's. So we hired a woman who is board certified medical illustrator to make the first medical illustration of an aroused female vagina, and we have offered it to textbooks for free licensure to use, and giving it to any doctor that we meet that speaks on these things, whether it's with their patients or if they are presenting at a conference or whatnot, just because it is an important image and it needs to be added to the canon of how students of medicine are learning. It,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
I I'm obsessed with so many things here because, like you said, like the initial thing, we are like, oh, orgasms, yes, that's great. But I like how that you've peeled back the onion to say, like, well, why wasn't this important? And I think that women's sexuality, because it is so integrated into our reproductive rights, it is so integrated, like sex can quote unquote work without it being pleasurable for a woman, whereas men don't have that same function, just given the way our bodies are designed, that in itself, it's like, okay, well, whether it is enjoyable, pleasurable or not is not quantified of whether sex is working for a woman. It's more often, her working, quote unquote working, is tied to, can she reproduce?
yeah, of course, and that's what is tied to the fact that women weren't allowed into clinical trials till 1993, is because of this idea that women's bodies are, sacred, and because of their ability to reproduce. And that was it. But there's other, besides a lack of sexual education for women in terms of a medical school environment, I mean, this translates to all sorts of other things like coronary heart disease. That is in textbook images. That is always, from what my limited research, that's always been depicted in how it forms and how it affects men. But coronary heart disease affects women in a very different way. And
Mm,
so it requires a different illustration to accurately teach a physician the difference, and let alone how to treat the patient herself and educate the woman on what is going on in her body. And so the lack of this drawing could be a factor in why women are so much more misdiagnosed for coronary heart disease at higher rates than men. So it spans all these.
I have to know, did like little Carolyn somewhere you're growing up, you're like, one day I'm be working with a sex tech, femtech company. Like, was that always
Oh,
on the radar to 9-year-old Carolyn?
no, but it doesn't.
Okay. I feel
But
like I could have known the end of that story, but I wanted to make sure that, maybe I was wrong. How did this come to be? How did you become, like, working in this space?
well, let me just preface this by saying I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I
The
remember
apparently sex capital of the United States.
super progressive, yeah. Um, and I remember being 16. I hope my mom doesn't listen. Well, I hope she does.
Hey,
Um,
mom.
when I was like 15 or 16 years old, like me and my best friend were in a parking lot and had an older friend who we had asked to go to the head shop because vibrators were only sold at head shops. It's just
Uh-huh.
like that's the Vice store, and just having our friend go in who was 18, because you had also had to be 18 to go into the head shop and buy us each a
Naturally.
vibrator. I feel like I've been sexually progressive for my own pleasure for a while. I can go through the history of how I've gotten here, which is basically just not saying no to interesting opportunities. Like, I thought this was a super compelling project. Like, it's an intellectual project
It is
based off of what.
intellectual as hell.
Yes, and I think I think it's extremely important, especially in today's cultural context, with so many things being like, I would like to think a post Me Too movement. We're post hashtag Me Too, and we're in a me first stage instead. And there's lots of conversations around
Mm.
female sexual empowerment. There's a lot of work to do. And I've always wanted to be doing something that affected social change to some degree. And the careers that I've had to this point have, I think, have reflected that desire in one way or the other.
Mhm.
And that has shifted. My interests have shifted, and feel like I've been good at keeping doors open because I never followed a perfect script of climbing the corporate ladder or anything like that. But I knew that I wanted, I don't know, I knew that I
Well, you
wanted to
did
be
something
involved
right
in
because you're a
projects.
chief operating officer, so you may not have climbed the traditional corporate ladder, but you certainly haven't. You and I originally talked and I said like, "We'll talk about fuck it all moments," and you like died laughing and you're like, "I feel like my entire life has been kind of like a little bit of a fuck it all mindset." So,
Yeah.
I think that it's like, I'm always curious. I very much prescribe to a very traditional narrative and then had that really fuck it all moment that blew up or disintegrated a lot of those beliefs and then I'm recharting that. I'm, 18 months into that journey.
Hmm.
I'm always fascinated. My co-founder, Katie, she has more of what we call the fuck it all mindset. I'm a fuck it all moment. She's a fuck it all mindset. So a moment is a singular moment in time. It's like things are going and then it's like this moment where you choose yourself and it is in opposition to a lot of times others' beliefs and even sometimes your belief of former self. A fuck it all mindset, it is ideally the goal that we hope for every woman. It's an active practice and questioning of what do I want? Like you said, a me first mindset. And that doesn't mean selfishness at all cost to every. I think that's the important distinction. It's that I'm going to check in with myself to know how I arrive best. What do I actually want? And in doing that, my impact is going to be exponential because I'm taking care. So we say it's like systemic self-care beyond the face mask. Like no more face masks and bubble baths. Like let's actually
Right.
take care of ourselves so we don't need those things to feel good. So
Yeah.
when you were talking, it sounded like you've been practicing a mindset of really questioning and pursuing what is right for you along the course.
Well, the basis for me saying that is the best advice I have till this day ever gotten. I was 21, and fresh out of college, and I was living in New York, and I had visited back home to Tulsa with my mom, and was talking about my insecurities about my ability to do this new job, and I was working at a publishing house as an editor, and she said to me, she says, "Carolyn, if you don't do it, some other idiot will." That was like, you're right. I might fuck it up too, but it gives you a mindset of like, there's just, I'm another idiot. And she didn't mean that in a disparaging way, but it's just like, you're not, no one's like got that, like, believe in yourself. Like, just do
Yep.
it.
I love that. My husband and I, that was our parenting mantra. A lot less qualified people have done this.
Right. Right.
So, like, I mean, that at some point you have to trust in your innate abilities and recognize. And I really love that. And being able to come from your mother is such a powerful thing. Moms and daughters, I feel like that could be a whole study within itself of just
Right.
those dynamics and those beliefs. But to have someone say, like, listen, take yourself seriously enough because if it's not you, it's someone else. That's such a gift. And you actually, that's one of our rapid fire questions, best advice. So you just
Oh,
answered
okay.
that. Like you just did the damn thing. So I love this. Wasn't on the plan. You've said yes to interesting opportunities. You come to Vella, no pun intended. That's just so great.
Mhm.
So I want to share with you some of the initial things that both you and Bobel shared with me and my co-founder Katie around Vella, around some of the mindset and how it's played a role in, I would say, the past like 6 months of getting to know Vella and not just the product, but the mindset that comes with it. So I'm 30, I'll be 33 this year. I've been with my partner, my husband for 10 years. We've been married for 6, have a 2.5-year-old, almost 3-year-old daughter. Um, Consider myself pretty sexually liberal, like have had partners before marriage. We've shared openly around Mother's Day in America, had an abortion when I was 23. So
Same.
okay, so
Yeah.
I have that, and I like to talk about that because
Hmm.
it's as someone who I was on birth control, we were using protection. Guess what? Still happens,
Hmm.
and it was with the partner I'm now with. So that that carries a lot of weight around what that means, and so my relationship with my sexuality and pleasure has really ebbed and flowed. Younger, it was a lot more bold, really free. And then in that moment when I was 23, because I was doing all the good girl things, I was in a long-term committed relationship, I was using protection, and this still happened. And then to have to make a decision that carries a lot of shame and a
Mhm.
lot of judgment,
Mhm.
my body then became a medical vehicle more than a sexual
Well,
experience.
and it
Like
became political
it
too.
became political. Oh
Yeah.
God, yes.
Yeah.
And just hiding that, like there were so many things within that. And so my husband and I, over at the rest of the world, the past 2 years, 3 years has been really hard on families, on individuals, like, very crazy period of time just at home, raising a family. And so originally started talking about women's health. I went to a pelvic floor therapist 2 years postpartum. And the things I learned in a $250 session, because first, mind you, when I was postpartum care in America. I have a lot of opinions on that. It's not
Mhm.
good.
Mhm.
I went to my doctor. She said, so this was a year later. So I had been peeing myself for a year, which is great. And she says, you might want to consider pelvic floor. This was like a very flippant comment. We'll look into it. She calls me back. She's like, hey, looked at your insurance. It's going to be $4,000. Wow, that's really expensive. So, like, let me see if we hit our deductible, maybe I'll do it. So, right there, I'm like, if the rest of my family needs to take care of themselves and get medical treatment, then I'll consider pelvic floor therapy. But until then, just gonna be weird with peeing. And all sorts of other things. So
Yeah.
then cut to it really becomes more of an issue. I'm having to do what they call stinting to pee, which is where you have to press to be able to pee well. So I start researching it and I find a cash pelvic floor company here in Atlanta. I end up meeting with their specialist. Amazing. She's like, $4,000. That's crazy. Come in for 2 sessions. We'll have you basically with your, PT at home. You're going to be good. The things I learned for $500 in 2 hours worth of sessions were things I should have learned at 13-year-old sex ed. The fact of diaphragm breathing being attached to your pelvic floor, how to make sure you're not emptying your bladder. And I am pissed off the fact that I learned about STDs and STIs before I learned about my own body. I'm furious
Yeah.
about that
Yeah.
because I have gone through my entire life. I'm a 32-year-old woman that I'm first learning this. So that was the first kind of like, wow, this is really crazy. And she shared with me, she said it's actually considered in every other country in the world negligent care to not have pelvic floor therapy postpartum.
Interesting. Very interesting. I've only even learned about pelvic floor therapy recently because
Right.
like as even a profession, I think it seems like
Exactly.
it's a growing one, but
It is. And I'm sure like social media ability for us to have these open conversations, because I think historically these are things that are had in private. And Katie and I talk about this a lot. Our moms have been a really cool like microcosm experiment. So because they are both in their 60s, different generation, things are kept really quiet. And when I first told my mom about this, we're at dinner with my stepdad and my husband, and I'm like, I went to pelvic floor therapy. And she's a little hush hush. She's like, oh, she's kind of whispering it. And so I'm like telling her about this, and she's like, I think I need to go. Mind you, she had a child 32 years prior, and she's like, I could go. Cut to like a month later, we're sitting there and she starts openly talking about this. So I'm like, okay, this is a microcosm of when we start talking about things openly, even within safe spaces like a family. There is generational gain here. Like she, for the first time, is talking openly. So that's like step one of me stepping into just knowing my body a little bit better. Then I meet Semaine and they're talking about these supplements and they're talking about the ability of all of our systems working together. Right now, like our period is the most common cycle that we talk about, and our menstrual cycle, but there's also immune systems, there's metabolic systems, and all of these are in play with each other simultaneously. And we'll get into, there's a lot of content coming around that we're creating, but that women work on 28-day energy cycles, men work on 24-hour energy cycles.
interesting. No,
Why?
I had no
Like,
idea. Yeah.
well, doesn't a 9 to 5 grind make a lot more sense when you think about men operating on, because their energy peaks during the day and it falls? If you look at back in the day when we were doing manual labor, they had to rise and set with the sun. So their energy cycles to be able to go with that, where women were doing more. So I'm learning about this. And then I meet Bulbul and I meet you and Vella. And a couple things that is said to me. Women are ambitious in every area of our lives. Like we're out here creating companies, we're leading our families, we are stepping forward in political movements like Me Too and Black Lives Matter. Like we're doing all of this stuff. And why is it in our sex lives, fine is the adequate answer for how it's going?
We are emotional laborers. And pleasure is an emotion, and we that emotion, we don't allow for ourselves. And
No,
it's not that it's I mean, yeah, it can be hard to have those conversations with your partner, but it's also like, I don't know, like female masturbation also is not something that women talk about that
right?
much. Like you don't need a partner. I don't yeah.
Totally. And so then I feel really compelled. So I start talking to my husband about this, just like, I'm really interested. I'm like, this is fascinating to me, starting to talk about like the systemic play things that got here. And I just invite anybody listening, and I recognize not all relationships are open, not all spaces are safe, but I have found that if you are willing to go first and come at it with this is my experience, it opens a beautiful door. So about 6 months ago, my husband and I start just having super open conversations of like, I'm fascinated by this. And did you know, like, the women's body changes? And I love that I think you all say like the women's most powerful sex organ is their brain. And one of the things that was said is like, Vella helps you forget about that load of laundry in the corner. Your body can still react, like you can be present in the moment. So you're not over here thinking about, and that resonated with me. And I think so many women, especially moms and people who are in long term relationships, there's an initial excitement that comes with sex in a new relationship, but over a period of time, as it becomes more normal and it carries the weight, right? Like who does the dishes comes into the bedroom. It is so intertwined, especially for women, just of how we're wired and where our bodies respond and where our minds. And I'm sure you know so much more about this. But when he and I were talking about this, I started to say, like, I want sex to look differently for us. So I'm 23 when I have my abortion, that sex really changes for us. We've been married, had a child, and now I'm 32. And I say, like, I want this to look different. I want to be eager to have sex. I don't want it to be something you're asking me and I feel guilty for not wanting to have. I want it to be something that we both come to and we both really enjoy. So, what does that look like? He was so excited by this conversation because he's like, I want you to want, I don't like, it doesn't feel good that you're not. And I just say, like, 10 years into a relationship, I feel like we are going through a sexual renaissance in our own way because it's coming from a place of honesty and like true care for the other person that is so much more intimate. I think that sometimes when we talk about sex, it's like, we're not talking about hypersexualized porn. Like I'm talking about like
Right.
intimacy with your partner and pleasure. And like you said, like for
Connection. I mean, like
connection.
physical and like mental. Yeah.
Yes, and then just like you said, like even masturbation to be like,
Mhm.
we're both working from home and it's like a joke within us, like, I'm gonna go to the bedroom. I'll see you in a bit. Like, don't come in unless you want to show, like, like in 2 p.m. So we got Vella, House of Wise, Amanda Getz, who was a guest on the show. She has sex gummies, CBD gummies, started taking those, which are just really fun things to try. And what I love, and we talk about this with Semaine, is it's not a one size fits all. Like, right, the fact that we now have options to be able to try and play and see what works for us. We got a vibrator. So you were 15, 16 getting your first vibrator. I was 32.
Yeah, I don't know what that says about me, but
No, I
I'm doing my
literally,
homework or studying for the
so
SAT.
I don't no, my husband and I both said this, and I don't know what this says about us as parents, but we both said, like, I hope our daughter understands her autonomy over her sexual pleasure earlier. Like, I would be devastated
Mhm.
if she waited till 32 to enjoy sex the way I am now enjoying it, that I
Yeah.
never had before, and not just sex with a partner, but pleasure for herself, because
Mhm.
that is a wellness, that is an empowerment to know that you are not there in service of your sexual partner. You are there to have a shared experience of self-worth as well. Like, it is a bigger message that we are sending to our girls and our women and our children.
I mean, from your perspective, do you think that like that many women even understand that masturbation is an option for them? I don't know. Women are fucking smart. Like
Women are smart. Yeah.
they get their bodies, but at the same time, like in movies or the cultural context that we live in, we hear about boys jerking off in middle
Totally.
school, and
Yep.
there's like a little bit of shame to that or embarrassment or whatever, but that's
Yeah.
completely normal for
Oh,
them.
yeah, like, for me, masturbation was not talked about at all in my sexual health, in conversations about sex with my family, friends, and it wasn't until I was older and had certain groups, like, I have, one friend who was just, like, super open about masturbation, and it always made me laugh, but she also opened the door of, like, "Oh, that's a thing?" Like, I was in my early 20s before I ever masturbated,
Mhm.
and that makes me sad and frustrated because I also then turned to boys who had zero idea what they were doing to try to meet some need that I wasn't even able to meet for myself. And I can say that now in a long term committed relationship, that honesty has invited so many more conversations around things we want to try together. Like it's become a healthier, more balanced relationship in our bedroom that has bled to other areas of our lives around sharing balance. And I we have to laugh at this story. So we had sex for the first time the other day where I orgasmed and he didn't. And I felt like so bad. I'm like, oh my God. And he's like, Casey, welcome to literally every sex that we've probably had in our history of being together where I orgasm and you didn't. And I'm like, oh
Oh,
my
he
God,
sounds like a great guy. I mean,
I mean,
like,
he totally
yeah,
is.
that's
But it was like, that's what men have been experiencing all this time.
it's yep, they've had it pretty good.
They had it really good. I love that we're talking about this. So I know that we're getting into like the sex of it. And I do think that it's important to do that. But you were talking, you all are VC backed, you're investor backed, and you go into rooms as a woman talking about women's pleasure. And something we were talking about is one, normalizing this conversation, saying clitoris like plain speak, talking about female arousal. How do you manage that?
Right. So, okay, Vella was developed by two scientists, one of whom led the development of Viagra and Cialis, and has had three articles written in the New England Journal of Medicine and is a very well regarded expert. So, when the doctor who developed Viagra said, I've got something, guys, that relaxes smooth muscle, we
Yep.
know that from our clinical studies. Um, anyway, what I'm trying to say is that if I go into a room of men, I have that as a point that they understand, and like they get how valuable Viagra is in their life. I mean, I'm talking to old white men about
Yeah,
this.
they get it.
They get it probably in a way I in some ways better than women, just because they understand the arousal process as physical, and because they have erections and it's this obvious thing. And so if I help them understand that we too have an erection, and I would dare to call it that in some
Yeah.
capacity, because it's engorgement, it becomes, your clitoris becomes more rigid and things like that. So once I start making that comparison, they understand the value proposition. They also, just like your husband was explaining to you, it makes him happier. It makes
Yes.
him happy and satisfied in his own sexual experience to know that you're enjoying it and finding pleasure with it. Otherwise, I think there's a sense of guilt, or I really don't spend much time thinking about or try to empathize with that. But above everything else, it's for me to walk in and sit at a table where I'm the only woman, and I'm in a, you know, with eight men all around me, and explaining this product to them for the first time. It is absolutely integral that I say all of this without any kind of sense of shame, because
Mm.
that shame is so contagious. And once they sense that, they're not going to see the market opportunity. They're not going to take it as seriously. So that has been a really important tool for me to have developed over the past few years,
Yep.
which has required development to say. And I'm kind of embarrassed myself in a way just to admit that vagina has just become a very normal word in my lexicon now, and it kind of always felt a little bit like vulgar
Yeah.
to me. And I look back and I'm like, I never want my daughters to feel that way. So we say vagina like maybe too much.
Oh my God. It's, I feel like you and I probably have a similar household. My podcast is called Fuck It All, and we talk about vaginas a lot. I'm like, I don't know what her vocabulary is going to be at 5, 7, 10, but
Yeah,
like, God help us.
I know. I have two daughters, one's 6 and one's 2. My 6-year-old is like, yeah, well, actually, it's pretty awesome. I tell her when I'm on my period. And when my husband asks me to do things around the house, she'll say, Mommy can't do that because she's on her period. I'm like,
Oh my God. I'm teaching my daughter this.
yeah.
I love it. I know we do too. We talk very openly about tampons or period cups. Like, mommy wants
Mhm.
that. Mommy once a month has a cycle. This is if we wanted to have a baby. Like, try to talk about it because for me, I knew periods were coming. I knew it was a thing, but I didn't understand the health aspect of a period and what that actually meant. I just like, oh, you're a woman. I don't know what that means at 12 or 13,
Mhm.
right? And so I think it's so powerful. And then to watch these young minds, I'm sure you see it, especially with your 6 year old, like, it's not weird to them because they
Mhm.
don't have the societal context. Like, it's just a very matter of fact thing. And that to me shows that like it is capable. Like we are capable. And I learned so much. And like my daughter is like the ultimate challenge for me to live my values because like you said, like you don't want them to carry any of the negativity or shame
Ex
that so many of us have.
Yeah, exactly. And so and also it's for their safety too.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, like, I want them to know what vulva means. Like, I want them to have the vocabulary. God forbid anything ever happen,
Yes.
but it's really important for them to understand their bodies in a
Yes.
deep way, as and just building the vocabulary at this age.
There's a stat I read recently, and I won't claim to be expert in this, but I do invite anybody listening to go look it up, that young children that know anatomical naming conventions for their sexual parts or private parts, vagina, clitoris, etc., are significantly less likely to one be abused because if it's called your PP or your TT, it's more easy to mask. And then second of all, that if they are significantly more likely to say something and report it earlier on.
They feel like they have agency over it.
Yes, exactly. And so
Yeah.
that's something that our family has really adopted. And yes, we had our own, kind of weirdness with it. And even telling grandparents, like, oh, we're going, like, no, we need to say vagina. We need to say those words. It's so important. And
Hmm.
so invite anybody here, act boldly in that because it is not only just for like societal good, it's for safety.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so tell me, like, what is Vella? Like, we've been hyping it up, we've been talking about it. Like, tell me specifically, what is it?
So it's called Vella Women's Pleasure Serum. The company is called Vella Bioscience. Our website is vellabio.com.
Put
By
this all in the show
Okay.
notes so everybody can have it. And we also have a promo code. Stay tuned to the end of the episode. Look in the show notes because you'll be able to give it a try.
Vella is a breakthrough. It's a truly innovative product. We've got patent applications on a lot of aspects of it, including its manufacturing, its uses, and etc. So there's nothing like it on the market, period. The main ingredient is CBD. And so there's other arousal oils and stuff like that that contain CBD. But what makes Vella special is that the CBD is encapsulated in liposomes. Liposomes are the most effective way to bring any kind of molecule like deep to the tissue where the site of action. So CBD is, and we're not a CBD company. CBD is just an ingredient that works for
Yep.
this, but only if it's delivered properly and only if you get the right amount delivered. It's a pre-play topical. It's a lotion. You apply it to your clitoris and labia, and it works by relaxing smooth muscle tissue, which is the same thing that Viagra does. It relaxes smooth muscle tissue in the penis so that more blood can flow in to the tissue and becomes hard. So that means engorgement and lubrication also are two of the big things that happen when you're aroused, and it's a prerequisite for orgasm. So what Vela does is it enhances your orgasms. They're more intense,
Mhm.
and it allows more frequent orgasms and yeah, longer orgasms. I mean, it works on 2 out of 3 women. It does not work for everybody.
Sure.
So Viagra, though, works on 50% of men in the real world. That doesn't work on every man either. And frankly, I don't know why. I don't know why there's that
Right.
discrepancy, but there is somehow. And yeah, it works too for any age, hormonal status.
I know that we were talking, and I believe it was like 17 to 75 or something. It was like, pre and postmenopausal because so many women, sex and pleasure is associated with their age. And then we've talked to several women that are postmenopausal, and they say that the worst part of getting older is not the changes, but that you become invisible. You become
Yeah.
invisible to society, to pleasure, to like, you're just not represented. And they're, they didn't stop being a human.
I was reading this. Well, I didn't read the article, but I read some of it. But in British Vogue, Emma Thompson was saying, "Did people just forget middle-aged women like enjoy sex?" And so they've gone invisible. So what we're launching actually in September, what we're calling Women's Intimate Elixir for women at every stage of menopause, because this is like a completely overlooked
Totally.
population of women who still,
What happens to literally every woman
yeah,
everywhere. So,
happens to
like,
every woman, and they still want to have sex. And so, vaginal dryness, there's issues
yeah,
that prevent it or make it more painful. So, what the women's intimate elixir has in it is a hyaluronic acid. So, we're trying to bring like the ingredients from beauty that most women, well, I wouldn't say most, it's a privileged class, we'll just say,
yes.
who know these ingredients but have never seen them in sexual wellness.
Mhm.
So we're trying to like just elevate the sexual wellness category so that it becomes, by bringing these ingredients, it's not only helping to normalize it because you see those ingredients in your skincare products,
Yeah.
but it's also helping to provide benefits and recognition of
Yeah.
what is missing from the menopause consumer choices.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, let's just take like a Target or a Walgreens or wherever. If you look at the beauty aisles, you have probably 4 beauty aisles between makeup, skincare, hair, body. When you look at sexual, first of all, it's put under family planning, which just that's separate. When we look at like fem care specifically, you maybe have about 4 inches of a shelf in one aisle. And that to me is when we talk about women being equal and valued architects of these systems, like I would love to see a women's aisle, a sexual wellness aisle, a health and wellness aisle that is comparable to our beauty aisles. Wouldn't it be, we talk about this in our episode with Samain, like, wouldn't it be so amazing to walk down that aisle and be like, oh my God, that's for me. And I feel represented and I want to try that. The same excitement that we feel about putting on our faces to make sure we keep looking young. Wouldn't it be great to do something for ourselves that is like true joy and pleasure and wellness?
Yeah, but the women's intimate elixir, we're being very careful. Like we are trying to show with it that a respect for that woman. Like we're not trying to
Yeah.
not trying to position it as like anti-aging. This is very pro-aging. Like I think that
Right. Like this is something good that your body is like, and it doesn't need to be shameful or wishing you were something else.
exactly. I mean, and like your wrinkles, you should be proud of them. Like you've lived your life.
Love this push because the beauty industry today is sold on become who you used to be. And I like what you all are doing is be exactly where you are. And here's products to enhance and amplify this moment in time in your life.
Yeah, exactly. And enjoy it because you deserve it. You've probably had, I don't know, you women are uh, women are just so amazing and complicated and just
The
such
best.
their best. And I want to be sure that we're giving them options. It makes me feel really proud to know that I'm part of a company that is really trying to fulfill the brand promise of sexually empowering every woman, despite their age or hormonal status or what have
Love
you.
it. I love
Yeah.
it. What have we not talked about today that you want to? Is there anything related to products, upcoming things that we want people to know, the changes you're looking to make in these systems? Like, I want to make sure you have the floor because this is such an important conversation. And I've told you, I'm working on the fact of us having several of these because I think this is such a deep and nuanced topic that, like, I want you guys back as much as you'll come. No pun. No pun. Oh my God, look at us go.
You make coming come easy. That's
Oh,
our taglines.
I love it.
um, that's a good question. I don't know, Casey. I don't like. I'm trying to come up with something smart to say that we
You
haven't
don't
talked
need
about
to.
before.
This is one hell of a conversation. Like
Yeah.
I feel I guess maybe it's something that we can leave our listeners with. Like, what is one wish, one homework item outside of get Vella? There's 16 uses per container, which honestly, the forethought to use this 16 times, like that could last you a year. Legit. Like, I hope it lasts less, but like, it lasts a while. The packaging is stunning. I love it. I know that one of the goals was to have it to be this really elevated product that you're proud to put on your counter. It is right next to my main products. I've got all my sexual wellness things right there next to my vitamins and my face cream. What is something that we invite our audience to do, like to become more in touch and more empowered in their own bodies and their own sexual wellness?
Yeah, I think it's recognizing, first of all, if you are orgasm challenged, you're not alone. Like 62% of women have a
Yes.
hard time reaching orgasm. Between ages 45 to 65, there's a study that said 55% of women, they interviewed like over 31,000 women in this study. 55% of women said that they have arousal problems. and 48% of women at that same age group said they have orgasm problems. And you see about in ages 18 to 44, so the younger demographic below that has same thing, but around 30% of both. So there should feel no shame in it at all. Like, and you don't have to necessarily get a product like Vella, but it could potentially really help you if you have those problems. But just knowing that those aren't reflective of any of your inadequacies as a person, and
Yeah.
especially don't let your partner think that they are like my worst, like envisioning the worst thing is like your partner thinks that you're deficient and therefore it doubles down on maybe your own insecurity.
I love that piece. And that is something I wanted to talk on. I think as women, a lot of times our ability to reach out orgasm or have a pleasurable experience in pop culture, in mainstream media, a lot of times it is reflected back on our partner, like, oh, they can't get you there. And what I just similar to what you were saying, this is something that is anatomically happening with majority or at least half of women's population. And this is not something that is reflective of your partner. It is not something reflective of any deficiency. This is a makeup.
Right.
And just like if you had a headache, wouldn't you go grab the Tylenol to make that get better? Or if you wanted to increase your flexibility, you would do your stretches. Like this is something that is a part of our wellness, part of our human experience. You are not alone. And something I might say is like, use this episode as a catalyst. Share it with your partner, share it with your friends, and say, y'all, I'm scared or I feel weird, but I want to talk about this. Because I can tell you in doing this on my mom's group, I started a chat. I just said, like, got my first vibrator at 30. Let's start there. And everybody's like, okay, send me your link. Like, what do you use? Like, I didn't know there's so many options. So I just think there is such open space for this and find it, whether it's with your partner, with your friends. I mean, like I said, my mom and I are having hilarious new conversations that we've never had before. After we talked the other day, I think I was telling you, my mom and her girlfriends are visiting her two best friends, and they're all in their 50s and early 60s. They call me on speakerphone. They're like, "Hey, so tell us about that new product." They're all like giggling. And the thing they say is like, "Does your partner have to know you use it?" And I thought that was really
Mm.
telling
Mm-hmm.
of like me and my husband in our 30s are like, "I want to use this with you." But in a different demographic, it's like, does the partner need that? And so there's a lot there. I just say, like, talk about it. The more we remove shame, the more empowered we are to get curious and take action and have autonomy.
Absolutely.
Okay, a few things for you because I love to just know when I talk to amazing women like yourself. When do you feel most in your power?
Mm, that's a great question. I feel most in my power when I guess I'm able to have conversations like this. And I feel like there's an audience that is listening. And, it's a vulnerable conversation to have to some extent. And, what we're sharing, sharing abortion stories like that needs, I mean, I don't, yeah, that makes me feel most in my power when I'm able to say things like that and feel like there is coming from saying things like that growth in me, but also I hope like influences other people to also not feel ashamed by it. The abortion was really, really emotionally difficult, and there wasn't resources for
Mhm.
or books or Joanna Newsom. Do you know that
Nope.
musician? I was like, I still am obsessed with her. But around the time I had my abortion, she came out with an album. And one of the songs on the album was called Baby Birch. And it's definitely about her having an abortion. And it helped me so much. There's not enough um, talk about the emotional complexity and the nuances of it. I don't regret it, but
Mhm.
it's still a majorly transformative part of a woman on, based off of the scenario in which it happened and
Yep.
blah, blah, blah. But I guess that's when I feel most of my power is like when I feel empowered, I guess enough by the women who I'm speaking with to be able to share things like that and to feel heard and to feel camaraderie. And those conversations help normalize what are right now not normal conversations still to have.
Completely. Completely. I love that. On the flip side, finish the sentence for me. When my power is shaken, I.
I remember that if I don't do it, some other idiot will.
Yes, girl. Thank you, mama.
I mean, that doesn't mean I'm like overly confident. I'm not, but it's just understanding that the variance of difference between you and somebody else be able to accomplish the goal is not, it's not that much. You can do it.
You can do it.
Yeah.
What are you reading right now? Or what is a book or a piece of literature that has been really powerful for you, especially in the work that you're doing?
I just read, and it's the best book I've read in a really long time, called In Extremis. It's a book about the war journalist Marie Colvin, who died in the Syrian war. She was just a remarkably brave, courageous, badass woman, and
Amazing.
was there at every war from the 80s to the 90s. And for me, that was just, she did whatever. She said, fuck it all. That was a real, true
Yes.
fuck it all lady. And I highly recommend that book if anybody needs an example of a life really well lived.
What's the best part of being a woman?
For me, the best part about being a woman, hmm, I I feel like a deep sense of creativity because of our ability, whether you do or not have kids. But we're, and I don't want to. I want to be sensitive to the women who have difficulty with that. But our physiology allows us in best case scenario to be able to create, and that's something that I find immense power from when I think about my body in terms of my respect for my body. Though of course it's also that same fact has led to our bodies becoming political objects that are governed by men, but that only empowers me even more to fight for our rights and our reproductive rights and our freedoms in that way.
I've had a thought this morning is they wouldn't fight so hard to control it if it wasn't so powerful,
Exactly.
right?
Hmm.
Power only wants to push away other power. And
Absolutely.
so I that to me is where while it can feel like at times our bodies and our sexuality is used against us, it's only because it really is the most powerful thing. And to your point,
Mhm.
I love the sensitivity. But within all of us, I think that just our intuition, our connectivity, a way that we birth communities, birth relationships, birth creativity, we are birthing beings, whether it is, a child or not. Like that
Yeah.
is just our essence. And that is also one of my favorite things about being a woman.
Yeah.
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 All right. Such a great episode. Such a great conversation. I could just sit and chat with you all day. I learn every time we have these. And I'm so grateful that you took the time to share your story, share what you're working on with Vella. And I invite everyone listening, go over to vellabio.com. You're able to purchase their products using our code itallmedia.
Come with Bella. I try it. I mean, you just have to try it and see if it
Yeah.
works for you, and it could change your sex life. So,
I just want you to know that like the 2023 Gordon Christmas is going to be like, you get a Vella, you get a Vella, you get a Vella. I am giving the gift that keeps on giving. That
yeah, yeah,
is
I love it.
so yeah, that is my call to action
Yeah.
there. Carolyn, you rock. This was so fun.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Casey.
much.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
All right, y'all. Another episode of the Fuck It All podcast down. My name is Casey Let Gordon. I'm your host here and the co-founder of It All Media. Head over to itallmedia.co/join. Get on our lately newsletter. It comes out weekly. You're going to be up to date on every episode, every event, every workshop, everything. Plus, very, very helpful, useful, empowering information like the conversation we had today with Carolyn Wheeler. And that's a wrap, ladies.